Joe. So let's start with I loved the how did Joe become Joe? And since I don't know you as well as Eddie does, take us back maybe to that moment when you were at IBM or before you were working for yourself, getting paid to be you, writing all of your books, writing your Substack newsletter, and let us kind of know where you started out.
Right, and given that very soft opening, I assume you're editing this to be what you want, and that as opposed to starting from scratch.
Yes.
Hey, Christopher, are you in?
Oh, we can't hear you.
No, but I could read his lips.
I'm going to be going through some native digital setup after this, I can tell.
Right. All right. So you want me to just go ahead and start?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I am very much a nerd from way back. I started using computers in junior high. I lived in Palo Alto when the ARPANET, was formed. My dad worked for SRI and others, and so it was in my blood. And after getting an applied mathematics degree, I joined IBM, doing very technical things. But for some reason, this switch flipped, and I got into enjoying management, and reading the Harvard Business Review was my first big thing, and got into management, eventually into strategy, and really opening my eyes as to what the world of business was all about. And then as a reward for so a big project that I managed, IBM sent me to MIT for a year to get my master's degree, right, as in the management of technology. And I found out I had to write a thesis. So I immediately said to myself, well, I'm going to write a thesis I can turn it into a book. And the second thought was that book's going to be on mass customization, which was a concept that Stan Davis, and it's a wonderful, wonderful book, the late Stan Davis in Future Perfect, came up with, which I read as a strategic planner at IBM. And when I read it, it was like the heavens opened up and the angels sang, because it explained everything I was seeing at IBM. That customers no longer wanted standard offerings. They wanted things customized just for them. And in the project that I ran, I actually worked with end customers and realized that every one of them was different and unique and wanted different things. And this solved the problem.
So Joe, I want to just pause real quick, because like for the native digitals out there who don't have the context for what IBM used to be. Right. Like what IBM was, because you joined it when? What year was it?
In 1980.
1980. So Christopher, I mean, you tell me, like, is IBM in 1980 the equivalent of?
Mm-mm. It was like number 6
Microsoft
in
or whatever.
Dow Jones, right?
Yeah. You're on.
No, he's not on mute.
Something's wrong with your microphone, Christopher. Maybe you got to unplug and replug in.
He's not putting up with it.
I can sense the frustration. So IBM in the 1980s was.
Yeah, IBM in the 1980s was the tech company. It's a sort of like equivalent all the
Mag 7 put into one, would you say, or like?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think at one point it was the 6th largest.
Can you
company.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I literally hope we'll edit this out. I tore all my shit out. I'm not on my super ding dong camera. I'm on my fucking MacBook microphone. It's fucking ridiculous. Yeah. It's like a gremlin came in here and tore everything apart.
It probably happened when I mentioned the word IBM, and then
I just always assume it's Putin.
Right. He's after you.
So wait, Christopher, Joe was just saying, we think IBM is like if you took the Mag 7 and you smushed them into one in 1980. Is that?
Right.
Oh yeah, IBM would have been Microsoft and NVIDIA and maybe even Accenture. I mean, IBM, it's hard to believe now because IBM is a shadow of itself. And IBM, even though it's a big company that does a good job for many customers, it's irrelevant today. It's got nothing to do. IBM's got zero to do with designing the future categories. They're not visionary in any way. It's really quite sad. Back then, when you went there, IBM was arguably the number one company that the smartest people in the world wanted to work at.
Exactly. And the best management proving ground and training ground that you could have.
Ever.
And Right.
And
And
when you came out of IBM with an executive level or even, director level after 5 years, 10 years, whatever it was, you could work anywhere.
right.
I mean,
Exactly.
you were the mayor.
Exactly. I actually participated in a task force, as we called them, in the late 1980s on what does IBM have to do to manage a $125 billion company, which they anticipate being in the next 5 to 10 years. And they still haven't got there in real terms, much less nominal terms. Because that's what happened to them.
So Joe, can I also ask the part that, so IBM was the place and you were the man at some level with that, right? And you describe yourself as a self-described nerd, computers, math, but you were a reader, right? And then when IBM sent you to MIT and you had to write a thesis, you're like, oh, I'm gonna turn this into a book. So clearly, you not only were you a numbers guy, you enjoyed reading, but I'm kind of curious, did you have an earlier writing experience? Because most of the math guys that I don't know can't write. So
it was very interesting. I did a lot of creative writing. I did poetry. I did fiction. I'll to
just
be a
like
little for fun. Well, in class and for fun. But the first book I never published was a Tolkien linguistics dictionary for all the Elvish languages and everything. I started at junior high school, I think. So to be a little not humble for the second, right? I had to do GMATs, right, to get into MIT. My GMAT was a 99% total because I was good at math and English, right? Math and English are both in the 90s, which shoots you way up because. And I love books. I've always read books, and I did want to be at some point. My goal was to go up the executive ranks, and in my 40s or 50s, retire, go back to school, and get a PhD, and then teach and write books. The only question is whether it was in business or theology. That's where I was going. So when I had that opportunity at MIT, it was like, wow, I'm gonna write a book, and that's what I did. I outlined an entire book. I found out what I could bite off when I was at MIT. I got a book contract with then Harvard Business School Press and finished it when I got back at IBM.
Who was at HBR back then? Was it
Gardner
Morse you were working with or somebody else?
Carol Franco was my editor, and there was another guy, I can't think of his name, who wrote the book Scuttle Your Ships, which was quite interesting. It was basically before Clayton Christensen. It was about disruptive innovation. You got to do it yourself, which I thought was a brilliant concept at the time. And his name will appear to me about 5 minutes after our podcast is done.
Joe, I have a question. What weight did books hold at that time? Knowing that you were going to publish a book, it was going to be with Harvard, you were going to have this, I think books are becoming, they're still this really, really high regarded form of intellectual capital. But I imagine at that time it was even more so.
Even more so. It was is credentialization, right, is what we called it. Which is why I loved going with Harvard, right? You can go with these other book things and that, but Harvard puts its stamp on it, says this is intellectually rigorous. This is a good book. This ought to be out in the world, and we want to publish it. Said a lot in terms of getting it out. And I remember talking to, I've been thinking about him a lot lately. My favorite professor at MIT was Jim Utterback, and he's the one that introduced me to his editor at Harvard, who helped me get the book contract. And then later he sort of lamented that I got my book out before he did. But I remember.
So Jim, this is a form of relationship capital. So you were his student.
Yes.
What did he teach? What class was it?
He taught the dynamics of innovation. He was famous for that. There's an Abernathy Utterback article from the late 1970s, I think it was, that is famous for understanding the dynamics of industrial innovation.
So he was Clay before Clay at some level.
Right, exactly. I can still remember in December when I was at MIT, I wrote a 15-page paper for him on mass customization. And you can still see that paper in the book, right? That it was spread out in like 3 or 4 different chapters. But there was this section, there was that section, and it really jump-started. It really is a great, great guy.
So can I ask you, what grade did you get on that paper? Because I imagine most professors are not going to be like, let me introduce you to my editor, knowing that there's some slight possibility that you might actually get published before I did. And like, sounds like he not only, so good on you. You wrote an amazing paper, it sounds like, with a great thesis on mass customization. And one of the things I love about you, Joe, is you very clearly, like, your ideas stem from shoulders of other people's great ideas, and you're very good about attributing the lineage of ideas with it. But like,
Yes,
there's something about Jim character-wise. He was pretty generous with you to do that, it sounds like.
yeah.
And does that speak about him, about your relationship?
Yeah. No, he's a very gracious gentleman. You know, we're friends. Last time I was in Boston, I went up to about an hour north of there via the train to see him and see how he's doing in that. And so, yeah, we became friends. I taught it, when I was in town, I'd come teach his class for him, or we'd get together for lunch. And that I still remember a lunch in the cafeteria at the Sloan Building after I graduated, where Jim says, see that table over there in the corner? And I said, yeah. He said, 3 Nobel Prize winners. I said, what cafeteria in the world are you going to be able to see 3 Nobel Prize winners sitting lunch over a deli sandwich?
I have a story.
Deli sandwiches are yummy as hell.
Right.
Is when I was at Chicago, I think 3 out of the 4 years there, a U of C professor won the econ Nobel, and I took a couple classes from them, but my favorite one, I won't name who. One of them walking with a couple TAs on the quad, walks by me, farts, and the TAs just start laughing. So that's my contribution to Nobel.
The only question is, did he fart on purpose or not? Was he making a statement?
Right.
If I say too much, you'll guess who it is. But yes, but I'm sure if there's some part of it was like, I am who I am. And
that's right.
It does not smell. So.
That's right. His farts don't smell. That's right.
I fart in your general direction.
Okay, Joe. So you have your book published. It does well. You're at IBM still when it comes out, correct?
Yep. So
right. Where do you go from there? What happened?
So it came out in October. Right. It came out in October of '92. Right. And I remember that December, I got Harvard to contact Stan Davis to write the foreword to the book. And I happened to be in Boston, I think in December of that year. And we were having a wonderful dinner. I just, he's my intellectual idol. He's where I am today because I've read his book. And I wrote another book that's based on his ideas as well. And at the end of this wonderful conversation, Stan gets out this little piece of paper and he writes something on it. He folds it in half and he slides it across the table. And I'm going, what's this? He said, this is my prediction for you. I said, well, should I read it now or later? He said, well, up to you. And so I opened it up and it said, you'll leave IBM within a year. And I said, no way. I love this company. My father accuses me of being brainwashed using IBM early in his career. He got in the computer industry on the ground floor. And I've got this wonderful job and I couldn't imagine, a better life than what I have now. And 6 months later, I called him up and said, hey, you were right.
And where did you go?
I started my own company, and to your point about financial it was a big decision because basically IBM, that's the time when Lou Gerstner came in. I met him once when I was teaching at the IBM Advanced Business Institute for this president's class. Acre was out. I can tell you a story about Acres. Can
I just do a quick side zebra hole? Lou Gerstner,
right?
Famous ex-McKinsey guy. IBM was his first stop out of McKinsey. Was that right?
I think it wasn't RJR.
RJR Nabisco. That's right. RJR Nabisco turned that around. Right. Yeah. Massive turnaround. The book, my favorite business book to this day, Barbarians at the Gate.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't understand it when I read it in college fully, but it read like a John Grisham novel or whatever, right? And turned around RJR, left RJR, which was a tobacco and cookie company, a snacking company at the time. And then to make the leap from that to mainframes and laptops and the forefront of technology, it was like, and then I forget if he had I think he went into maybe one of the private equity firms after that, or like,
I think so too.
He had one of the great careers ever. I got a quick, funny rabbit hole story about Lou Gerstner, if you like. So the founding CEO of Scient, where I was the founding CMO, so he was my boss, is a guy named Bob Howe. And when Gerstner, do you know Bob?
Yeah, I worked for him at IBM. IBM Consulting Group.
Fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
That's great. So you'll love this story. So Gerstner hires George Conrades to build up IBM services because he wants to go. He sees that as a big part of the future. And then Conrades says, well, if we're going to do services, professional services, we need a high-end strategic consulting capability, a McKinsey type capability. And so Howe was one of the top 3 or 4 guys at Booz Allen. And there was a new CEO position at Booz Allen. Bob didn't get the job. And so Conrades hired Bob to be the, quote, founder of IBM's management consulting group, strategy consulting group. Anyway, Bob tells this funny story about how a lot of people at IBM were terrified of Gerstner, and they didn't want to tell him the truth, particularly when things were bad, right? And so they do these quarterly business reviews, these QBRs, and everybody would kind of try to stick handle around what wasn't working in their area. And so he went to Bob. And at this point, Bob was running, management consulting had been built. He was running that. And he was also the worldwide GM of the financial services vertical. So he was dealing with all the big banks, and the strategic consulting fit, it all fit together. Anyway, Bob tells this funny story about, so they get to Bob and he says, Lou, they're killing us on the CMOS, but they're killing us on the CMOS. Lou, they're killing us. Right. And and Bob has these, remember his hands? Lou, they're killing us. Right? It's like, and then Bob says, everybody in the room is silent. And Gerstner's looking at me with these eyes. And Bob says, you could have heard a pin drop. And he said Gerstner loved him because he was one of the few guys that would tell him
the truth,
where the turds were. And Gerstner was a big, scary guy and all that. But what people didn't understand, and I think this is true of all, you tell me, Joe, senior guys like that, they value the people who will tell them the truth.
Yes, most of them. There are a few that do not, but yes, most of them. They're precious. I mean, they really are, because
Gerstner loved Howe,
right?
And Conrades.
Bob was great.
I met Conrades when he was running Akamai, and I was at Scient, and we had lunch, and he went off for a long time about how legendary Howe was and how much he loved Gerstner.
Yep. Yeah, Bob was great to work for. I worked in a management research function whose job was to develop ideas for the IBM Consulting Group. And when Gerstner came in, I remember Bob telling me, he said IBM Consulting Group was supposed to break even next year, and Gerstner now wants us to be profitable this year. So we had to get rid of everybody that wasn't billing, and we weren't billing. And they asked me to be a regular consultant, but they also gave me and my wife 6 months salary to leave. And so that's when the big decision was. And the funny thing was I had a article with a couple of professors in the Harvard Business Review. And I remember Jim Utterback again telling me, he said, because I asked him, why would people pay you thousands of dollars to tell them what you've written down in a book that they can get for $25? I didn't understand that bit part of the business, right? And he said, they want to hear it from you. They want to hear it directly. And he said, if you get a Harvard Business Review article, you can double your prices, and you get a second one, you can quadruple your prices. So I wanted this Harvard Business Review article. And my wife and I were both considering leaving. We worked in different parts of IBM, and we were praying about it. And the Harvard Business Review article never came. Says, okay. So we decided finally to submit both our papers. We were going to leave. So they gave us 6 months salary, right? So I got that little cushion to go on. I figure I can always get another job. I'm not worried about that. And we submitted our papers the morning of June 15th, I want to say, 93. And that afternoon, Harvard Business Review calls and says, we want to do your article, and it's in a rush. We got a hole. We need to get this done. I spent the whole last 2 weeks working with the editor on it, right? That's Providence. Coming through. So that's what started. The book had
the world was on your side.
Exactly. The book had my name and address at IBM. Now I could create a company name and do that. And so I went out as a one-person company. IBM was in fact my biggest client for the next 2 years, teaching back at the IBM Consulting Institute. I met also when that Harvard Business Review article came out. I met this guy named Jim Gilmore who worked for CSC Consulting. And he said that he found my book in the
CSP back in the Hammer days, right?
Yep.
Was
Yep.
the
also
shit.
a
They were the
huge-
hottest when Hammer and
Champy, right.
Campy wrote Re-Engineering the Corporation. CSC was the hot for almost maybe a decade, certainly close to a decade. They were as hot as you could be.
Right, and it was amazing what they were able to accomplish, and actually, and I found out from CSC that Michael Tracy and Wiersma, right, they had a book that talked about customer intimacy, and I found out so these are internal documents that originally they called customer intimacy mass customization, but then I came out with a book and they said, well, we got to come up with a different name, which I thought was very interesting.
You own the category.
And so. Yes, exactly.
You know what's so funny for me, Joe? Because I think I graduated from college in '96, and I started recruiting for consulting jobs and would have been in '95.
Such a youngin',
relatively speaking. Yep. And it's all the names that you're dropping were all the books that I read to prepare for my consulting interviews and the like, including yours and the like, right? I mean, this is the part that's kind of so crazy about it. But like, can you imagine being whoever your manager was at IBM and being the guy that, did not keep Joe Pine at IBM?
Right. But I am so thankful, right? Yeah. I'll tell a little bit of story about there to the experience economy. But I want to mention that, so Jim Gilmore found the book in the bookstore, and he's told me his reaction was, "Oh shoot, somebody else has already written it," although that might not have been the same vowel that he used. But he contacted me. We met, and basically my philosophy then is I was actually partnering with a lot of different people. I wrote my second HBR article with Don Peppers and Martha Rogers. I'd partnered with some other people in that, and so he hired me to help develop ideas, doing some summer research program that led to the third article on the 4 phases of mass customization. That came out in '97. And by that point, we decided, well, this is the relationship that sticks, right? This is one that we want to create a partnership on. And so we did that in the spring of '96 and formed, I had Strategic Horizons Incorporated. We formed Strategic Horizons LLP, right? Limited Liability Partnership. Took on Doug Parker, who worked for him at CSC in marketing. And so that's what I've been doing ever since then.
So
Joe,
when Don Peppers and Rogers wrote the One-to-One Enterprise, was that what it was called?
The original one was One-to-One Future in '93.
One-to-One Future. And so that book, I think, blew everybody's mind. It certainly blew mine, and it was unbelievable. And it was so far ahead of its time. And today we are getting to the full realization of it.
Yes.
It was almost too far ahead of its time. But man, you have worked with, so let me ask you this. I think somebody could hear you talk and hear about you going out on your own and becoming what today we would describe as a creator capitalist and a category designer. Creator capitalist is defined by somebody who makes intellectual capital and monetizes it. And go, well, yeah, this is really cool. And talking about the old days and all these names and all that. But I can't be Joe Pine, because to be Joe Pine, you have to have a cranium that weighs 4,000 pounds. And I'm not sure I'm that smart. I'm just curious what your reaction to that would be, Joe.
It's something that I won't say anybody can do it, but you do need, if you've got something that does have intellectual capital, that you know what it is, and you become the person that knows this better than anybody else, that absolutely you can do the same sorts of things. And there's so many, well, as you guys just write about all the time, there's so many more ways to do it today than just, okay, write a book and then hope people call you, right? The way to be able to reach people and find those niches of demand out there is so strong today that yeah, not everybody, but most everybody if they can find that thing that they know best, can do it.
The other thing in that regard, I would describe you as an intuitive category designer. And I remember very distinctly, when did Experience Economy come out? Late 90s?
The book came out in 99. I discovered it in 94.
Yeah. And I remember reading it, and I was shortly thereafter, of course, I became an advisor to Rob Burgess at Macromedia and met Al Ramadan, and we built the whole category for them.
And Al hired me at Macromedia and then Adobe.
Well,
right?
Inspired directly by you, right? Yeah. We created a new category design around experience. The software category was called Rich Internet Applications, RIAs. Right. But the business strategy that RIAs delivered against was the POV. We said experience matters. Great businesses deliver great experiences. Yep. And so we literally were ripped off, inspired, however you want to describe it. Yep. And so, by the way, as a side note, it's a full circle reality for me that we've become friends today, because, when I read your book, you were, and you still are, on this Mount Rushmore of legendary thinkers for me. But to get back to the intuitive category designer, did you know, Joe, when you guys wrote, when you and Gilmore wrote The Experience Economy, that you were creating a whole new category of business?
Yeah.
You did.
Well, I will use slightly different terms, which is, I always say I didn't invent this. I didn't create it. I discovered it. Right. I discovered what people
were
the
category designer. You were
as a category. Yes.
The guys that made it go.
Yes. And I tell you again, with lack of humility, not 2 weeks goes by without somebody telling me I changed their lives because they read the book, they read an article, they went to a speech, they interacted directly with me. And it's just sort of amazing to me that still all this time.
I will double down on that, Joe, and say there's a lot of famous business books, some of, that are the rage. And then at some point it's like, oop, shouldn't have included that case study. That didn't live long, right? Or whatever, right? Or the idea.
Like re-engineering.
Yes, absolutely.
That didn't age well, now did it?
No, it didn't age well. The experience economy seems to get younger.
More
valuable. Like I think there are very, very few ideas in the business book land that aren't kind of the Bartles and James rocket ship goes up and it's down, but yours keeps going up. And I mean, that's it's kind of unfathomable for me to think like the idea is even more relevant today than it was back then.
Right.
That's what it feels like.
Right. And that's because we didn't identify a fad, but a fundamental change in the fabric of the economy. And if it is a change in the economy, then it is always going to go like that, right? Until something surpasses it and it starts to go down, as happened with commodities and goods and services.
Kat, you were going to say, I forget, you were going to jump in.
I mean, I have so many questions. I'm going to save my favorite one for last. But so, Joe, obviously you were on a massive trajectory. I can just imagine what this would mean today for the companies where you were at in your career, working with Harvard, publishing your own books. You have a good financial cushion to ride you through it. Was there any parts of it that were more difficult or tricky, or you were less confident in others? Or was it kind of like, I have this foundation and I'm just going to continue to ride this wave? Or for people who are kind of thinking about doing this themselves and maybe they have some reputation to lean on, how would you kind of help walk them through that for themselves?
Well, part of my nature is I'm always thinking about what's next. I'm always looking ahead and trying to figure that out. My superpower basically is that I recognize patterns, right? That's part of my math training. Right? Recognize patterns, figure out what's going on in the world of business, and then develop frameworks that first describe what's happening and then prescribe what companies can do about it, right? I call that my meaningful purpose, my superpower. One of the things I discovered is that once I had a book come out, I would tend to rest on my laurels for too long. I would, make hay with that book and and do what I can, and then it'll take a while for me to get back into, okay, let's figure out what's next, what's going on, and then let's start to write it and so forth. And so, there's a long time between books. I never want to be a guy who, we could mention several people, right, who comes out with a book every 9 months or something, like little, things. That I wanted to be meaningful when it does come out. And so that's sort of the one thing I think I felt I could have, my book I'm coming out with end of this year, I could have written 4 or 5 years ago. Couldn't have written it 10 years ago, but could have written it 4 or 5 years ago, and didn't. So that would be the one thing that I think I can improve on.
So did that translate at all into starting your Substack? When did that come into play?
Yeah, so that's thanks to you guys, right? I mean, Eddie in particular, because we talked a lot, but it's because of seeing what you guys were doing and recognizing that it's something that I could do. And I always say that there's 3 things I wanted out of the Substack, but the main one, and the reason for eventually doing it, I started it in March of last year. I decided to do it in It's funny, I decided to do it on, I think it's January 19th. And as soon as I decided to do it, and my partner, Doug Parker, was going to, all right, he'll go investigate and figure out help me figure out how to do it. I started writing, right? Because it's a catalyst. That was the key. What Substack is for me is a catalyst. There are people that are here. It's now over 1,700 subscribers, well over 100 paid, that want, that are there because they want to see what I have to say. And some measures how I think and so forth. And so that was the number one reason that I did it. And so I started knowing that we weren't going to start until March. I also wanted to get ahead of the game. I didn't want to, I always avoided this sort of thing in the past, like even podcasts like you guys do, because I always thought of it as a gaping maw, right? It's just sitting there and wants to eat up your time and everything. And so I said, but no, let's use it as a catalyst to get that writing done. So this is as fast as I've ever written a book because of that. And second, I wanted the feedback from it to help people make the book better. And there's several cases where they made it obviously better, including helping with the title and the cover and that. And then thirdly is to get that, is to make the money off the paid subscriber as I was going along.
So can I say, so Joe, we met in Sao Paulo, right?
Right.
Remember, we were both at that conference, and I think there were other Americans there, but like I forget. Somehow we're like, oh, we had met, and then we should grab breakfast or dinner, or whatever we had, and then I remember, and then we discovered a whole bunch of things we had in common. Same editors at HBR,
right.
Christians and everything else. But like the part that was very clear to me, and that I wasn't sure what to expect, because sometimes you run into kind of thought leaders and gurus, and you're like, somebody else clearly wrote that book. and I was like, no, Joe is the real deal.
You thought there was a chance that Joe was just a supermodel representing
no, I'm not. I had no preconceived notions of Joe, but there are the people that you run into like, oh no, because like there's a couple of folks I've run into, write massive books, they have big consulting practices, they teach, and then you're like, the math of the number of hours in a week don't add up. And then you find out one of them is outsourced, or 2 of them are outsourced to other people, or whatever else it is. And so like when I met you, Joe, I was like, clearly not just, you may say you rested on your laurels for long, but I think your comment about always looking for what's next, clearly curious, and clearly valued the discipline of writing and found joy in it inherently. And so when we were catching up and we're talking about what Category Pirates was doing, I was like, oh, Joe, you should absolutely do this. In part, I knew it was because you loved writing and that you valued writing in and of itself, and that it would be a great fit for you in a way that there are other people for whom, not that they're one-hit wonders or whatever else, but like they don't find joy in the journey of creating new intellectual capital in the same way that I think you do, in the same way that I think we do. That was my observation.
You can't, in my mind, you can't possibly be an expert in a subject unless you write on it, right? It causes your thinking. You develop new things. There's so many things that I came up with that I knew I'd have to come up with, even though I didn't know coming in. I'll tell you. I'll pull a Christopher and tell you a quick story about another writer whose name you would recognize. We once did these event together, and each of us had like half days that we do. And he told me, he says he had just come out with a book and he says, yeah, a half day, man. I had to go back to my previous book to come up with some ideas to fill a half day. And I told him I could spend all week on any one of my books here talking and interacting with people about it because I know these things. I mean, and he knew it. It wasn't like he had a ghostwriter or anything, but it just wasn't at a level that businesses could operationalize it.
Well, and I bet, Joe, if somebody were to say to you right now, hey, there's this business conference down the street, and some super ding dong was supposed to give a speech and they got sick, and there's 5,000 people there, could you go up and do 10 minutes,
Yep.
an hour,
time you want.
2 hours, 4
Yep.
hours, 7 days on
Exactly.
experience and everything about it? How much prep do you need?
If you want slides, then just the amount of time to put some slides together. Otherwise,
And
just
if I
give me a
don't
flip
want
chart or
slides,
a
I just want you
whiteboard.
to get up and go.
Zero prep. Zero prep.
You know, Joe, the way I think about you is, if you've seen the Tarantino movie Kill Bill, where the
Yes.
Sonny Chiba character is the master craftsman swordsmaker, and he's vowed to never make another
Right.
thing to kill people until, you know, the story goes on, right? And then he's cajoled into creating a new one. And I would say the line that he says in the movie, he says something about like, with all humility, this is the greatest sword that I've ever created. And if you meet God, he will be cut. Or something like that. And I think of your ideas and your frameworks. There are some frameworks that you see like, you know, works, but you can poke holes in it or whatever, right? Yours are a level of craftsmanship that is like, there are no holes, because I think you take the time. Craftsman is the best way that I can think about it, of not just thought leader, but you craft it in a way that it holds up and it's stronger than any, like that's the reason why I think your ideas endure with it. And in part, I think, you know, the latest one on transformations, I'm so excited about. You know, I'm so glad you had the feedback along the way. But to me, in a world where we were just kind of jamming about this in our latest mini books around AI and the importance of puking into it versus waiting for perfection, puking your raw emotions into it, your hopes, your fears, and just letting the AI kind of sort through all that mess with it. Because I can't think of, in a world where AI will take away a lot of jobs and this and that, the ability to fully feel your emotions and have them, and the desire to want a transformation in your life. I can't think of any more human things than that will have staying power and endure no matter how big AI gets with it. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about the next book, but I'm curious if that resonates with you or is kind of along the lines of the feedback that you've gotten from other people.
Yeah. I mean, this book is even more human than the book we wrote on authenticity in that sense, which is very much. And there's some relationship because they're both fundamentally about identity. All transformation is identity change. Right? If you didn't change your identity, it was just a change in state, you know, as opposed to a change in being. And so you are changing people.
Hold on, Joe. Hold on.
Yeah.
Can you say everything you just said again?
Yes. It's very much related to the ideas we have in authenticity, because both of them are about identity, and transformation is identity change. Right? Otherwise, it's just a change.
Transformation is identity change.
Correct.
Can you pop the hood on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a phrase I actually got from San Jose State professor Susie Ross in her book on transformative experiences. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's basically changing an element of identity, some aspect of identity that you have, which could be behavior and aptitudes and so forth. It could be values that you have. It could be your narrative of your life that comes, you know, that rises from your heritage. And that you can even change post hoc and then give you a new way of being. It could be your worldview and core essence of things. But it's basically the way I like to phrase it was, I was X, now I am Y. Right? Any way you can take that and change X and Y. It's a math formula, but
I can't believe we're having this conversation. Life is so amazing. So yesterday, I was in Austin working with as hot and high potential AI startup as you could possibly imagine. And it was the first time in real time with a company that I'm serving that I popped open the AI, and I had been taking notes the whole time in our custom LLM that we lovingly call Lucy. And at the beginning, I said, hey, this is the company, this is what they do, and I just like to take notes with you. Anyway, I co-created their category design strategy with the AI in the meeting. And then after about a day or so of doing that real time in the meeting, taking notes as people are talking and we're jamming on ideas, I'm just pumping it all in, like Eddie said, puking. I'm not worried about it. I'm just puking ideas in. I don't know which are the good ideas, which are the bad ideas. It's just back and forth, me and the AI with, 6 executives, founders in the room. And then when it got to a point where I thought it was really great, I put it on the screen, presented it to them, and then we all vibe created it together from that point. On the way to the airport, the CEO says to me, he says, that was incredible and everybody's excited and we got to an incredible result. And, we pulled off in barely 2 days, what normally takes 3 months, and la, la, la. And then he said something really interesting to me. He said, look, I'm just really getting to know you, but I would imagine a big part of your identity is being the guy that comes up with the big ideas, being the innovative guy, being the creative guy, category designer, et cetera, et cetera. And you just did that with us with AI. And it's very clear that AI was a huge part of it. And we at Category Pirates have been writing about how you got to treat AI like a co-founder. Right. And then he says to me, Joe, what does that do to your identity? Because you didn't do this alone by yourself. You did it with AI. And I said to him, I don't know. I didn't think about it that way. All I thought of is I just went from having a sword to a lightsaber, and I'm stoked to have the lightsaber. And I didn't have an identity. I didn't feel threatened by it. I felt empowered by it. But afterwards on the plane, it did make me think, this is interesting. I am building a new identity, and we at Category Pirates together are building a new identity for the way we work and therefore who we are in treating AI as a co-creator and a co-founder. And so is what you're saying, and I guess the question answers itself, but I want you to elaborate. Whenever we embark on a transformation, like treating AI as a co-founder and putting AI at the center of everything you do, which is exactly what we're doing, that becomes a transformation. By definition, requires a change in identity and being willing to do that as opposed to being threatened by it. Yes? Or yes. Please elaborate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a change in identity. There may be some things that we are threatened by, but yet we eventually accept them. And what there's sort of 2 types of changes. Like what you did was organic. You weren't going into it expecting that. You realize you come out of that hey, you got this capability that was far surpassing what you could have done yourself, far surpassing what the AI could have done itself. And that combination was created great value for your client. So it basically was this transformative experience you had over those 2 days. In many other cases, it's where you have an aspiration, then you seek out how do you want to transform, right? So you can have that one life-changing experience, but more often it's I have an aspiration, I am X, I want to become Y, how do I do that? And throughout history, right, every human being is the product of his experiences. That's the only way we ever change is through the experiences that we have. But throughout history, it's basically we've been responsible for that ourselves. Or at a higher level, we're our own general contractor. We may hire a self-help book to help us with that. We may hire an app to help us with that. Maybe go to a fitness center or hire a personal trainer or whatever. But now what companies need to realize is the great value they can create by being that general contractor for the aspirant, right? So the customer of a transformation is an aspirant. I have an aspiration. All right, let me be your guide. Let me be the one that takes you through this. And you guys know the hero's journey so well, right? Your podcast on that was fantastic, about being that mentor that takes them through that entire transformation journey. Hero's journey is just a wonder. It's the only form of dramatic structure that is automatically transforming. If you can take them through a hero's journey, like I remember one line I was editing this chapter the other day about, it was particularly talking about financial companies and consultants, that it said, you are not the hero. The client is the hero. The aspirant is the hero. You don't get that.
So amazing.
It is so amazing. And so let me ask you this. This may seem a little out there, but stay with me for a sec. Companies have identities, right? Sometimes It's called culture, but that's a thing. And being an employee, to the discussion we had earlier of IBM, you were proud that part of your identity was, I'm an IBMer,
Absolutely.
right?
I was an IBMer. That's identity.
Yeah, that's identity. Okay, so let that swizzle in a part of your head. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Mark Andreessen, and he underscored a change that all of us in tech have been well aware of, but I thought he did a beautiful job. So let me see if I can represent the way he did it. What he said was tech up until somewhere in the 2000, maybe 5s, 10s, somewhere around there, was mostly enabling technologies for companies to use to do legendary shit in their companies and to transform their companies in many ways, as you well know. I mean, when you move from the mainframe to client server to PC, all of these things have transformational effects. He said what changed in tech was, you think of a company like Uber or Airbnb. He said if those companies existed in the early 2000s or in the late 90s, they would have built reservation software for taxis.
Yeah.
Or mobile reservation software for Airbnbs. And those types of companies, there were many others as well, he argued, and we all knew this, but I just love the way he crystallized it. Those companies said, fuck it. We're not going to sell our tech to others because the others aren't going to get it right. If Travis Kalanick takes the Uber tech and tries to sell it to the taxi industry, this transformation, this new different future, this category design that he created doesn't happen because they won't do it. Certainly not at the speed and that he would do it. So rather than selling the tech they built, they took the tech that they built and they just did it. And there's many other examples, right? DoorDash, and I mean, it's a very long list. Yeah. Okay. So if you think about that, and then you think about now AI. So third thing to get spinning in your head, our argument is that that AI needs to be the co-founder of your business and your career, and that the way to think about it, a lens to think about it, is stop, change, start. There was your business, there was your career before AI and after. And you're not reimagining your business, because reimagining speaks to, I'm a taxi company, I want to use this cool new tech. Because that's extending the status quo, extending the past, maybe in a very positive, powerful way, but it isn't a complete new category. It isn't a radically different future. So if you accept that and you say, what's going to happen here with AI, with the S&P 500? Almost all the value created in the S&P 500 has come from the Mag 7. And so my question is, do you think the S&P 500 and major corporations like that will be able to do the transformation and the identity shift to do what we might call a stop, change, start, and treat their business and their careers like a startup? Or will the AI companies just go, you know what? I could spend my whole life trying to sell $1 bazillion worth of software to the S&P 500 and convince a bunch of unwilling people who are radically committed to the status quo. Or I could just say, fuck it. And we're going to have Ubers and Airbnbs in B2B in every major category, and sort of the S&P 500 gets blown away by people who say, you know what, I'm going to build the AI tech for the steel industry, but I'm not going to sell it to the steel industry. I'm just going to be the AI Uber of the steel industry, because they can't get it maybe intellectually or more identity wise.
Yeah, the identity issues there are paramount, because it often, who you think you are often stops you from being able to do these things, because it would change who you are so much, right? That's that trepidation that you have. And I think, I'm not sure if you presented that as 2 or 3 options, right? So are the companies that are currently successful today going to embrace AI as their co-founder, work as a startup, and therefore succeed? Some will, but it's more most unlikely scenario. Will the AI companies themselves go off and do it? I think also is unlikely, because they got the same identity issue from the other side, right? It's the entrepreneurs that say, I can do that, like with Brian Chesky, like with the Uber founder and so forth.
Travis, yeah.
It's an interesting 2x2 you could create, because we
Yep.
This is what we do.
We think in 2x2s, Eduardo?
We all do. We all do.
Of organic versus aspiring transformation on one axis, and on the other one is open-minded to identity change and closed-minded to identity change, right? Because if you're open-minded and it happens organically, great. If you're open-minded, you have to be open-minded to aspire to identity change. But there's a lot of folks who are closed-minded for any number of reasons of, I like who I am right now, and I don't feel the need to change, to I'm scared to change, and I don't think I can do it, or some variant of it. But I think it's a lot of inertia, because Christopher, I've seen this over my career. I think, Joe, you've seen this as well. When you're dealing with the S&P 500, the identity is a lot of risk aversion of, I got 4 years till I need to retire.
Exactly.
I don't need anything to change until that happens.
Right.
So
and then I'm gone.
And then I'm gone.
Right.
So that's the part that's so interesting with that.
It's like, it reminds me of, Jack Welch, right? He just he timed his exit to be where I won't get blamed for everything, and the next guy's going to look like he failed terribly. When no, Welch failed by not setting up the next guy for success. Yes. And that's the case today with many CEOs as well.
100%.
Okay, Joe. So let me ask you this.
You still had a bunch of questions.
I mean, yeah, but we could talk all day. I'm cognizant of time. So most of our readers, subscribers, we do have some founders, executives, people who are at the big B2B companies, category kings and queens. But a lot of our people are entrepreneurs. They're like you. They want to build their own thing. They want to have their own IC. They want to have that control over their companies, their lives, their financial future. So when you think about transformation and someone who might be going through this as an entrepreneur and need to do it for themselves, for their category, what would you recommend, knowing what you know about that identity change process, that transformation process?
Yeah, and in fact, it's one of those that I've got this same paragraph in 2 places, right? And that lists a whole bunch of metamorphosis, right? There's different levels and types of transformation, and the biggest one is metamorphosis, right? A wholesale change, or really core aspects of identity and so forth. And that's one I talk about, is becoming an entrepreneur. And so I think the one of the things that I talk about is to let the identity change precede the actual transformation. Right. And this is it can be particularly important when you have what I call remedial transformations, like you want to quit smoking. Right. Well, just identify as a non-smoker. Right. Identify somebody who doesn't, and then you won't look at smoking as something you want to do. And it can apply to a lot of addictions and so forth. But the first thing to do is identify yourself as an entrepreneur, even before you leave a big company. So look, in my heart, I'm an entrepreneur. That's who I am. I can't help but go out. I can't help but do this. And then that attitude that comes from that identity change will force you to figure out what it is that you needed to make that identity happen to be true. You may have imposter syndrome for a while, which is fine, but that will happen. Where one day you say, "Look, I did it. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a category creator."
It's so amazing because I think you're right in that embrace the identity change first. Deal with the imposter syndrome second, and then I do think there's an aspect of if I take a page from your earliest parts of your life and your career, is find the daily transformation activity that you can do, that you find joy in, that whether or not you have a payback to that, the equivalent to when you were high school or junior high writing the Tolkien dictionary, you weren't looking to get you weren't thinking like someday this will lead to my HBR book contract and like that'll set me up for my career. Like you were doing it for joy. It was fun. And I think there's so much. I think that's the other part is like probably for all of us here to recognize that identity change can be very, very scary. But we want to cheer the people on who want to do it. You got to embrace it, as you said. Embrace it first before fake it till you make it, however you want to call it, but embrace it. You got to deal with the imposter syndrome. We all go through it, and there's a bunch of things that you can do on that front. But find the daily things that give you joy, that give you progress towards transformation, knowing that it's kind of out of your hands in terms of the timing of when the transformation actually occurs, and what the nature of the transformation might actually look like. Like that's one of the things that we've been writing about on the creator capitalist front, is that you kind of have to give up as you said, embrace being an entrepreneur, embrace being a creator capitalist. It may not be the way you thought it would look. And you may reject it when it actually occurs because you're like, that wasn't the way that I was intending it to be. But if you can find the daily things that keep you going, then and I think this idea of the desire for what's next, the curiosity that I think is embodied in you, then you're probably it's more actually emotional and self-knowledge than it is intellectual to kind of make the leap, is my sense of it.
Yeah. And you mentioned emotions earlier, and it's a very important aspect of every transformation. Even though you can say that you can transform emotionally, physically, intellectually, or spiritually, but in almost all of those, emotion is a major factor. One of the things I talk about in the book is how to take any experience and turn it into a transformative one. From the business perspective, is what I call encapsulation. And that's where you do three things. Before the experience, you have preparation to help them prepare, right? And if you want to become a category entrepreneur, then a category killer, then the best preparation in the world is category pirates, right? I can tell you that right now, right? Everything that you do and everything you have to have this before you go out is just like amazing, right? It didn't exist 5 years ago. And then you have the experience. And then you need two other things, which is reflection and integration. Reflection and reflecting back on that experience. What was the highlight? What happened? What change did I perhaps make that I want to more fully make and want to understand? And that's one of the things that I don't know if it's necessary to do it daily as an entrepreneur, but at least weekly, reflect back on your week. Where did I find joy? Where was I in flow this week? How do I make more of that happen? Where did I find drudgery? Can I outsource that? Can AI do that part? And then the integration is then you take those habits, you integrate them into your lives until you get through that imposter syndrome and say, yes, this is me. I have done it. And I am who I am.
Well, I have a prediction, kind of like back to your story about the fold the note is, I think last time one of the times we talked about, the experience economy has got to be on the Mount Rushmore of best-selling books at HBR for sure, right? Some variant of that, right?
Yep.
Based on the category science that we have done, looking at the top 444 best-selling books and realizing that it's the category, not just the author and the writing, but like the two categories that rise to the top of the most successful books that have sold for the longest: personal finance and personal development. Right. Our prediction is that the Joe Pine book on transformation will be your best-selling book which is saying something given the mountain that you already stand on. But just knowing the power of what it is, the relevance on a B2B basis, an enterprise basis, as well as a personal basis, it would seem patently obvious that this will have the biggest impact and sell the most books.
Well, I appreciate that, Eddie.
So.
I appreciate that. And one of the things I did was I took your advice, right? The category pirate advice in Snow Leopard is to, as I wrote a business book with that personal angle, right? Yes, yes. Because
yes, Joe.
I am a semi-academic, so I'd often talk about one. When one does it, no, this is you. When you do, and I would talk about you as the consumer, the one to be transformed, and you as the business. Sometimes in the same paragraph, right? Now, because I want them to feel viscerally that about transformation and what a difference in their own lives and how they can do it. In fact, I just finished this morning editing the afterword is called reflection. Instead of a preface and an afterword, I got a preparation and I have a reflection. And I started editing it this morning finished it with the editor, and the very last part of it is like I want you to transform as a result of the books, and thereby transform your business, and thereby enhance your customers. And the last thing I said is that I'm looking forward to find out how you are increasing human flourishing in the world because of what you've read here.
Wow. Amen. And, I love that. And one of my favorite lines that Tim Keller's ever uttered, he talks about all praise is great, but there's nothing like praise from the praiseworthy. And when you showed, and I texted this picture to Christopher and Katrina, when you showed us your dog-eared copy of Snow Leopard with Post-it notes sticking out, I was like, I've never felt more honored by anything like that ever. Like I
still have it. Look at it. I got it right here. Look at how many Post-it notes that is. Right, that is the ones at the top are the ones like you really want to remember, and then half of those are written in and so forth. And yeah, and I'll also say this, right, is I am a category pirate.
You sure are. How do you get that? And do you have the hat? For some reason,
I don't have the hat. I got the flag, but I don't have the hat. Do I need a hat? Is there a hat?
I can't get a hat. Kat won't give me a hat.
I hold the keys.
Kat, come on.
I hold the
Kat
keys.
has the hats.
But I'm glad you have them.
Joe needs a hat before I get one.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe. Kat has the hats. Cat in the hat.
Cat has the hat.
One final question to send everybody off on this amazing conversation is, do you have any other book recommendations for people who are reading Category Pirates other than yes, please include your books. We will link them. But any other ones that stand out to you that have stood the test of time that you think other people should read?
I think I think of this as sort of a category pirate-ish book. I still recommend people go back to Stan Davis's Future Perfect from 1987, and it is as applicable today as when he wrote it. And so it's just a book that I think that will open your eyes. And one of the things he does is he goes through technique as well, about how to come up with things. He came up with mass customization by taking words, right, put them in little strips, throw them in a hat, literally, and mix them around and pair words, right? And he's pairing words, and all of a sudden he gets mass customization. He goes, "Whoa!" Right? Which was my reaction. Whoa, that is something, right? And then, okay, what does that mean? And so he was one of the first books to talk about the shift from physical to digital, which he called from matter to no matter. And so I still recommend that book to this day. I'm trying to think of what other ones that might
Joe,
be.
in honor of Stan Davis, we're gonna have our AI team create a Category Pirates Stan Davis magic hat that generates two random words that have no relation to one another. Right. Come every day, and it'll be two more random words generated that are put together, and see what happens there.
Right.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Joe. We appreciate it. We are so excited for your new book. We are so excited for all the transformations that will come from it. And it's always good to have you have you on.
Joe Pine, you're a legend. You're a hero of mine. I know you're a hero of Eddie and Kat's. And to think that we would be, collaborating with you, hanging out with you, jamming with you, it's amazing. And I can't wait to read your new book. And thank you for the massive contributions you've already made. And knowing you as I do, as we do, there's no question in my mind, to Eddie's point a moment ago, your new book is going to be right up there on that Mount Rushmore. We know it will be. So we love you spending time with us and educating us a little early and just being in our world and helping us and our thinking. And you really are an extraordinary man, and we deeply appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Christopher. That means a lot coming from you. And I want to thank you for the contributions to making who I am going to be when the book comes out.
Amen.
Well, and just as a side note, writing the book, and I'm guessing everything that will happen in its wake, which will be extraordinary, will transform you, won't it?
Yep, I believe so.
I think that's the good Lord's plan for all of us, transformations.
That is correct. Where do you see the dedication, Eddie?